Welcome to Masculine Journey. We're glad that you're with us today, and we have a topic I bet you didn't think we would talk about on the air. I mean, it's just not something that really comes up in Christian conversations very often. I mean, have you really heard it in Christian conversations?
No, we didn't initiate the deacons very often,
Yeah.
in this sort of way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in other ways, just not that sort of. Yeah. We were talking about the topic of
Assume the
initiation.
position.
Yeah. Exactly right, Robbie. We are talking about the topic of initiation and how in the world does that tie into your Christian walk, your time with God, your relationship with God, or does it? And so we're going to be talking about that today and visiting different aspects of it, and of course, different clips. It's not something that we originated to talk about this week. We actually watched a video from the Ransom Heart Group on the topic of initiation, and we're not going to replay their topic in here, but we're going to talk about how that kind of landed with us and how we've seen God doing initiation with us over the years, right? And what that's produced. And so as we go through, just be fun and enjoying the conversation as we learn about it for the first time too, as we learn each other's stories a little bit differently. Darren, you have the first clip.
Yeah, and I mean, this is you've heard us talk about being enticed by God and disrupted and dismantled and healed and restored. Well, this is the dismantling part, right? I mean, that's really what we're kind of talking about, is how God deals with us. And sometimes it can be comical, and sometimes it's a little more like boot camp. Not the boot camps that we have. I promise we don't put you through an initiation if you come to one of our boot camps.
It's got to be at least a third.
Yeah, right. Now, yeah, if you come back 3 times, we're going to pull something on you. But just ask the people that have been there more than 3 times. But yeah, this comes from the movie Hacksaw Ridge, which there are tons of military boot camp clips out there that we could use. This one just encapsulates a lot of humor and the idea of, you don't know what you don't know, and you need to know that type of thing. And so that's what this clip is about, is the drill sergeants coming into the barracks for the kind of the first time and introducing himself and letting these guys know they don't know what they don't know.
And speaking of observations he's had.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Regarding them.
Yes.
So here we go.
There's a lot more there that we probably didn't need to play on the radio.
Yeah, we had to edit it slightly.
We had to edit it a little bit. But the fun part is we have all been private idiot at one time or another. I've been that guy with God a lot, going to God, I just don't get it. Why is life like this? And he's going, well, you have a knife in your foot, idiot. And so, there's that sort of thing. And honestly, I mean, God hopefully is often playful with us in that regard. but he is sometimes, has to get real. And so for me, initiation growing up, if you would, as soon as we talked about the topic the other day, I thought about all the different stupid boyhood, clubs that we invented, out in the boondocks of Oklahoma. And, now I never had to go through the initiation process because I was very intelligent. I was the one inventing the club. That meant everybody else had to go through the initiation that I myself did not want to endure. And so, it was always something stupid. And I remember doing something really crazy and it upset one of the moms that was everyone gets a trophy mom. And I remember her coming to my house one day and knocking on the front door and said, if you need ideas on initiations for these clubs, I will happily help you with that. And I'm thinking, no, I got lots of ideas. I just don't want to share them with you. And that's it for us. I mean, when we think of that initiation, thankfully, God is not like that with us. He doesn't put us through torment in order to be a part of the club. He actually goes through the torment so that we can be part of the club.
Right. So when you're thinking about initiation, and we talked before on here about the stages of the masculine journey. You have boyhood, you have the next couple stages as you go up. Where do you think that most of that initiation comes? Obviously, it's in all of them. But is there any one stage where it hits more than others, you think?
I think the boyhood, apple of your daddy's eye, hopefully dad is initiating you really well. But then, most of it, I think, is in the kind of cowboy ranger, that stage.
I was thinking the same thing between cowboy ranger and warrior, or, even of a deliverer. There's this point where you need to be, at least, brought into the fellowship of men, right? To feel like you're a man, to feel like you've been integrated into a community of men that see you in that light and respond to you well. Now, unfortunately, didn't happen for a lot of us, but I think it's a big part of how could you ever be a king if you hadn't been initiated into being part of the fellowship of men.
And I think every little boy is immediately drawn to that. Like, I want to be a part of a company of men. I'm willing to do what it takes to become a part of that. I don't know that every dad, to your point, Robbie, recognizes the need for that in their son. I remember my dad took me, man, almost everywhere he ever went. If he was going to a buddy's house to work on a car, he took me with him. Now, it's probably because my mom was, on the verge of having a nervous breakdown or something if he left me at home. But he would take me, to go do things. We went to all kinds of cool things together. But then there were also just times when he would say, come on, we're going to go visit Uncle John. Well, what are we going to do there? We're going to go visit Uncle John. That was about it. But in the process of the drive over, having the chat with dad or whatever, but then getting there and hearing the war stories, hearing the Harold boot camp stories. Hearing all of those things and just being there as a little boy with wide eyes thinking, wow, that's what being a man is like, and some of it was probably not accurate and some of it was very accurate, but my heart was always drawn to that. I can remember growing up when we would be at a family reunion, I love playing hard. I love jumping off the cliffs and, riding bikes fast or motorcycles or whatever. But I also loved hanging out with the old guys and just sitting and listening to their stories. Now, God created me, obviously, to be a story hearer and a storyteller. I didn't know that then, though. But man, was it cool to hear, these stories from older guys.
Yeah, as you guys are talking, if you think about good kings in history, they became a good king because of all the failures that they had along the way. Because if you get somebody gets into a role, you're working at a job and somebody gets put in a role, but they've never been unsuccessful at anything. what's their expectation going to be on you? If you fail, then you're out. That kind of thing. The good leaders have learned from the mistakes. It's just a part of the initiation process, right? And so to be a good king, and whether your kingdom is your family, which is for all of us that have families, right? Or it's bigger, your family and more, it's those lessons in life that God helps us go through that gives us the background to go through what we need to go through in the future to get us through those things. Harold, a little bit about, you got an initiation story for us you'd like to tell that you can tell on the air? Because there were some we heard that we really couldn't tell.
Yeah. Well, one of the ones that I've been thinking about doesn't involve a more or less defined or formal requirement as initiation. I've seen a lot of videos lately on YouTube of Medal of Honor winners. And one of the themes that runs through that is they didn't do it to win the Medal of Honor. And when they were asked, well, why did you do that? Usually at great personal risk, it was because their comrades were being killed. Somebody has got to do something to change the current situation. I'm going to do it. And some of those guys are, if you were just to look at them, it's like, yeah, he can be a librarian, but nah, he ain't going to win the Medal of Honor, not on a battlefield. And yet they did. A lot of them did things that you just can't believe it unless you hear the details or read about them. They went so far beyond what you would expect. And to me, that's a club that if you could be initiated into that, you are somebody.
Amen.
Absolutely. We're getting ready to go to break. Go to masculinejourney.org to register for the upcoming boot camp. If you've been to a previous boot camp, masculinejourney.org. We got your clips next.
Thanks. All right.
I almost played a clip for your church from Band of Brothers on why we fight. To that point, that it wasn't for any glory, it was for the guy next to me. I just couldn't get to one that I felt comfortable with the editing actually playing.
That's why I wanted to dive in so heavy, and I actually got some pushback. We didn't come to watch a movie.
We're getting ready to come back here in a minute.
Yeah. Pat Benatar.
Welcome back to Masculine Journey. That's Pat Barrett with the song Lead Me. I know, Darren, you thought it was going to be Pat Benatar.
I was so excited about Pat Benatar being a part of our bump.
Yeah, we tried to work it, hit me for best shot. It just didn't seem to go with it really well. But no, we're talking about the topic of initiation. And that song sums up a lot of it, that, you want God to lead you through it, right? So you'll get what he has in store for you. Right, to rewire you, to make you back into the person he meant for you to be when he created you. Right, and that takes a process. A lot of that's through an initiation. The world takes us through an initiation all the time, and we don't often see it. Right, it's just how things are normal, and God's got to rewire that normal. Darren, you were talking about before, people wanting to be a part of something. It kind of makes you, when you think about it in that light, it makes you understand gangs just a little bit.
It does.
Right, they're willing to do just almost anything to be a part of something bigger, even if it's horrible.
Community and brotherhood sisterhood is written on our soul. It's in every fiber of our being. And you're not going to fight against that. You can direct it, but you can't stop it.
Mhm. No. Robbie, you have the next clip on this topic of initiation.
Yes, I do. And so, it's an interesting combination between the movie Animal House
Yeah, classic, classic.
and Top Gun Maverick. So you're saying, Robbie, how could you possibly do this? Well, as I began to think about the process of initiation, and by the way, part of this clip they used at the initiation part of the survival school at Wild Heart. And the idea, if I began to think about the principles behind some of the things that we know as initiation, which you hear from Animal House, they're in the big, I think the Delta, whatever, Sigma, deal.
Whatever.
And he's telling them to assume the position, and then they take this big old paddle and they begin to whack these people. And, the idea of that is literally, we are going to humble these people. Humility, right? And blessed are the poor in spirit, because you need to be humble, or you got to know you need to know something before you will try to learn something. And so God's all about being poor in spirit. And this is, initiation creates this situation of this paddling that you're going to get, to some extent. But also, moving into the Maverick Top Gun, all these guys, if you watch the movie Maverick, he's going to teach all these guys. They've graduated from Top Gun. They are world-class dogfighters. But he's got to teach them there's more. There's something bigger. There's something deeper, right? And when you think about advanced boot camp, think about, so many of us, or me, coming to my first boot camp, I got this Christianity thing down. I have a relationship with God. I hear from God. I'm walking with God good, and so I don't know what I don't know, as Darren pointed out. And so there's a point of, wow, I need to be humbled. But then also I need to think about the new identity as being part of this band of brothers. In other words, not only going to be dismantled, but something's going to happen to your identity, as is the case with assume the position, right? He's becoming a member of whatever, or, that your identity is literally changing into a soldier or whatever situation you are. Well, as in the Lord's army, believe me, it's the same process. Right? And so as you listen to this clip, I'm just making the connection quite clearly, I think, between, what, thank you, sir, may I have another, to what, Top Gun Maverick was doing with these young pilots.
Here we go. Can't hardly wait.
Yeah, the picture you can't see, this is on the visual, is they're doing push-ups, these 200 push-ups as Maverick is shooting them down. And so they're they're really learning something that, like, wow, I don't have the skills I think I need, that it's going to take for the mission that they're being trained for, and in order to go deeper. And I think God is constantly doing that with us, and doing that with our communities.
Mhm.
That we were meant to be in a fellowship of men. We were meant to help initiate brothers into that. But at the same point in time, we are constantly also, thank you, sir, may I have enough? Because life is that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, I think back about all the things that I've gone through that I was very unhappy about going through. And then when I let God in the midst of it, instead of, I should have been reaching out to him before it, but when I let him in the midst of it, the learning and the perspective that you get when you come out of it, you're grateful for having gone through it, but you don't want to go through it again. And there's this step after step of, we can either take what happens to us and we get bitter, or we can get better, and when God's in the mix, we're going to get better. And if he's not in the mix, we're probably going to get bitter.
And the thing I absolutely love it, is that we have this heart because God has that heart. And so when you were a kid, I don't know what you got trained in. I was in the service department of a dealership because that's what my dad did. And I was in the parts department, and the tricks they played on me, right? Like, go find me a muffler bearing or a radiator hose for a Volkswagen. All these things that, I spent hours trying to understand. Or they would throw me, they used to have a condenser as part of the ignition system in a car, and they would charge them up with electricity and throw them at you. Here, I need one of these condensers. Well, such nice. The second I touched that thing, of course, it zapped me with 150 volts or whatever it was, enough to get your attention. And all these things that at the time were very frustrating and humiliating. But I look back at them now like they loved me. I mean, they were guys, and that was their love language. They were initiating me into the fellowship of technicians, into the fellowship of people that worked in the service department. And of course, when the new guy came in, of course, it was game on.
Oh yeah, you look forward to the new guy coming in for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and it's not a lot different in anything that you do. And Darren, you talked about sports teams. I remember when my sons were playing sports, there's a version of that whichever team they were on, right? That you have to go through as the new guy. New at work. There's things you got to learn. Even on the construction side, on how many guys, new plumbers, it hasn't happened in a while, but for years would come up and tell them that their boss sent them to find the pipe stretcher. There's no such thing as a pipe stretcher, or the left-handed wrench.
Yeah.
All wrenches are the same,
Yeah.
right? They're left and right-handed. But, the guys don't know. And again, initially they're upset, but then they eventually get the perspective, oh, they're just making me one of them. If they didn't like me, they wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Right? Or if they didn't want me to be a part of the team.
I remember my dad's buddy growing up. It was his best friend. And he was the coolest guy I knew because, he raised and trained Dobermans, which was pretty cool in my book. But he also had like boa constrictors and, things like that, which was also pretty cool in my book. But then he would take me to go see, car shows and things like that periodically, or take me on a hike up in the Rockies because my dad was handicapped and couldn't do it. And so Jim would. And so Jim was the coolest guy in the history of the world to me as a little boy. And I remember the first time I was helping him do something, and he said, "Son, hand me that frapping apparatus." And I'm looking around like, what in the world is a frapping apparatus? I have no clue. And he finally pointed at the hammer, and which, if you look at a blender, the final stage on a blender is frap.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're going to beat something really badly, you need a frapping apparatus. And so he would always come up with those stupid, terms for things, which I just loved and picked that up. And so, to this day, I still give stupid things stupid nicknames,
And as soon as
including
you said
people.
Doberman, I couldn't help but remember I was washing cars at another dealership. I was younger, and back then they had these electric squeegee ringers that if you put the squeegee through, it would take the water out of the squeegee. But it was the last thing you wanted to do was put your hand through it.
Oh, yeah.
She would gladly grab and put your arm all the way through it. So this guy set me up for 2 or 3 weeks, telling me that behind this fence over there, he said, man, they're the meanest Doberman pincher. You don't want to get too close to that fence because they'll jump and they'll come get you. And so one day I'm putting a chamois through the ringer and he comes up behind me, grabs my leg, goes, rah, 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 rah. Sure enough, man, like right up to my
Oh, yeah.
shoulder, that thing got
Oh.
me.
And it keeps rolling.
But at the time it was extremely painful, but now it's like it was being initiated into the fellowship of men.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I hope this topic of initiation, you'll take it this week and you'll look to God and say, God, where have you been initiating me? And I just haven't had the eyes to see it. What are you doing right now in my life? What have you been trying to do? Because He's trying to do good in your life. It doesn't always feel that way, right? Because it's not pleasant to be humbled, right? But it's necessary to be humbled so we can also come out the backside a stronger person. So spend time with Him in prayer today and over the week. Also, take time, if God lays it on your heart to help initiate somebody else in a kind way, in a kind way, take that to Him and say, okay, God, let's go do this together. It's in your name I pray, Jesus. Thank you. See you next weekend.
That was good.
The second you said Doberman, man, it came flying back at me. Oh man, what a bit.
You're talking about those things. I remember when I had a babysitter for a short season when my dad and mom both worked, which was not very often. Mom usually worked all the time. Dad was hit and miss. But she had one of the manual. You'd run and then you'd run it through. And as a little kid, you're cranking it, and all the time you get your finger in there, and you're doing it yourself. I can't imagine the automatic one.
Oh yeah, it's typically mounted on top of a 55-gallon drum
It is.
with an electric cord hooked into it, and you would run your chamois through there.
Yeah.
So in that vein, the fun thing to do was as soon as you wrung your chamois out, that's when it's perfect
To snap somebody.
to snap somebody, right? So we would wait until we knew somebody was coming back in. Like I worked in the wash bay at a dealership, and
That's
so
exactly where I was.
and as soon as somebody would come through like that door, we'd be standing there and just whap, and hit them and just light them on fire.
It does.
Well, I was doing that one day. One of the guys that was one of the leaders in the make ready department knew that the owner of the company was walking through. And he started going, "Hey, Jerry, what are you up to?" Well, his name wasn't Jerry. Jerry was my best friend, who I thought was getting ready to walk through the door. And I had the chamois ready. And Don Harris, the owner of the dealership, walks through the door, and I go, whap. And I just lit him on fire. and he looked at me and turned and walked right back out the door because he was going to kill me. So funny. And he set me up like that twice. The other thing we would do is take a wash mitt, the lambskin mitt. We would take a wash mitt and wait for somebody to walk through the door and just sling that soapy wash mitt at him and hit him in the face. Same thing again.
With grime off all of
And
wash
I
basin.
hit Don Harris smack dab in the face, and he had his keys in his hands, and he dropped them. And the sad part was he was bringing the keys to me so that I could drive his Jaguar for the next week
That is sad.
to take his kids to school every day and pick them up from school every day while his wife and he went on a cruise. And he dropped the keys, and I just picked him up, and he walked out. And then a little while later, he came in and he goes, "Did you pick up those keys?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "I expect you to use that car every morning to take my kids to school and every afternoon to pick them up. And if you ever hit me with anything ever again, I'm going to kill you." And I was like, "Yes, sir." And then before he walked out, I go, "Mr. Harris?" He goes, "Yes." I said, is there any way I could like take my girlfriend out on a date one night in your car? And he looked at me like, you have the gall. And he said, you put one scratch on it, and I will cut you with that.
Oh, we're
like,
still on the feed.
I know. But I
Yeah.
said, okay. But
Well, I
I mean,
had
it's
a-
just that stupid.
I had another boot camp.
Can you share this one when we're live on the air
Oh,
here?
yeah.
Okay.
Good.
I had another one of those things that kind of flew by. There was a professional football player named Pat Fisher. He played college ball at Nebraska and it was with the Washington Redskins as a pro, or either the St. Louis Cardinals. I forget now which.
Pretty much the same.
But one day we were out and T.I. needed to get word somewhere else quick. And I volunteered and I took off running hard as I could go, which, you know, an unaccompanied trainee running. Well, anyway, he saw me running, but Pat did. And he came up to me and later, and he asked if I had any shoes with me. And I said, well, I got some sneakers that are up in the attic. We didn't have access to our own clothing. Well, he recruited me because he had a race against 3 or 4 gentlemen of color on Saturday. He recruited me to fill a lane, and I ended up running in a 100-yard, I guess it was a 100-yard dash. I don't remember exactly the distance, but I actually beat one or maybe 2 of the other guys. Now he actually won it, but boy, the guy that was second was really pressing him. But he was a pretty outstanding pro player. Played, he was either a cornerback or safety, I forget.
Was this before his football
Well, he-
career or after?
He was in training, but he was special.
Oh, gotcha.
He would lead calisthenics for the whole group. I mean, he was a trainee, but he was more than a trainee. And I'm guessing he was already
Like an OCS or something.
he was already a pro player at that point, I think. But that was one of my more legitimate experiences at basic training.
That's the things that,
It brings up a lot of, cool memories to some extent, but, from my standpoint, of things that went on in certain situations where you were trying to fit in or trying to be part of something. And, one of the most devastating feelings as a man, I think, is to feel like you're an outsider.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
I'm not believed to be a man or less than whatever that looks like than the average person that goes to something along those lines.
Well, it's probably the same regardless whether it's man or woman.
Yeah.
For that.
and it's exacerbated if you've not matured in Christ enough to be comfortable in your own skin. And to some extent, none of us are comfortable in our own skin, right? But until you get to the point where you can kind of get to that point where you go, yeah, I am who I am. I'm okay with that because Jesus is okay with that. And, I've got these people that love me and care about me. And, that's a good enough, it's enough. And it's kind of, I think it's in the movie Fried Green Tomatoes, where the lady has some young girls pull into a supermarket.
Tawanda. There's a Tawanda part.
Okay,
She
and
screams Tawanda. Yeah.
well, and and
Yeah.
they steal her parking place.
Yeah.
And so she just backs her car into them, and just kind of like bam, 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 and they're like freaking out. And she's like, "I'm 50. I have insurance."
Yeah.
It's just like when you get to that part of
Yeah.
your life where you go, "Yeah, I can handle this," But yeah.
I didn't see that.
It's a good movie. You'd actually like it, Robert.
It really is a
I
good.
just don't like fried green tomatoes. And I guess that's the part that turned me off about the movie is
It's a really good movie, though.
I don't like them either, but I have had them once when they were good. And it made me want to try them again, and then I realized, no, I still don't like them.
I grew up with them, so I was used to it. We had them every fall when they would no longer ripen.
Shirley MacLaine plays, her part in that is just, it's
Yeah.
unbelievable good.
it always broke my heart how she turned out because she was so cute. Did you ever see the movie The Apartment?
No,
You know what I mean?
Poor
She
Sam
was
Rockwell.
unbelievably beautiful and cute and all this. And it's like, what happened to you? She got rough.
Mhm.
there's a term for that, but I won't say it right now.
I know it. I think we all are envisioning that term. Sam.
Yeah. Welcome to Masculine Journey After Hours. We're glad to have you with us. If you don't watch us on Facebook or on YouTube, you're missing out on the best part of the conversation sometimes. 'Cause we have some really interesting topics. That's why we often come back laughing.
And thank you for not looking at us on Facebook.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you've seen the pictures, I know why you don't.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, we do have mirrors. We
Yeah.
know what it look like. So yeah, we are talking about the topic of initiation today, and how that ties into our Christian walk and our time with the Father. How does that fit in, and why is that a critical part of our life? And so, as we're going through sharing, we're just talking about different aspects of how we've seen that unfold in our life. And so, I've got a clip. I have the first clip of the show, this particular show, right? And it's from Braveheart, and it's kind of a mashup of a couple different scenes. And where we have in this scene is young William Wallace, his dad and brother get killed in the war, and that he didn't have a mother. The mother's already gone somehow. We don't know where she went, but assuming she died. And so William's left as an orphan, and he's standing at the graveside, and this person rides in, and it's his uncle, and we'll hear that part. And then you hear a couple other things of the interactions with him and his uncle, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Well, one little
Yeah.
prefix is that, Sam identified the clip as Braveheart Socks.
Yes,
So-
I did. Yeah. That was my name for that. clip.
So if you think about that as you're listening to the clip, you'll go, oh, okay, Braveheart Socks. I get it.
Yeah, see if you can make the connection.
Yeah, that's there you go. That's a tease.
It's only because I didn't know how to spell the other one. some of that was more visual, but I didn't set it up fully like I should have probably. But at that end, he's William is looking at the sword and he's enamored by it. And that's what his uncle says. Look, first you used to learn your intellect, and then I'll teach you how to use the sword, which echoed something his dad had told him before. And when you first introduced to Uncle Socks, he comes in and he's this gruff guy. And you're like, wow. And his first statement is, well, you didn't want your dad to die either, did you? And like, wow, what a jerk. Right. And then as it progresses on, you have a scene where he's praying. He's saying, okay, God, and doing his prayers. And right after that, these musicians are playing on the bagpipes. And William walks up and you have this conversation. And so William goes from a place of, I don't really like this guy. I have no desire to be with this guy. I want to stay at my home, to, oh, there's somebody that's been through what I've been through. And if you watch the movie, watch it again and watch it for this to play out. But that time with his uncle was the most impactful time in his life. It made him who he was as a man. The uncle took him to do all these pilgrimages and these things that he got initiated, right? And it really changed him completely. And that's what we're talking about that the Father does. He takes us through initiations to change us completely, right? From who the world has made us be, that he never intended us to be, to the people he designed us to be.
One of the things I love about that story is, Brooks and the whole idea of masculine initiation plays throughout the whole movie. I mean, it really does. And even as little boys, the two boys are out there playing, throwing rocks, and they're playing war and all of those different things, right? And there are the games of initiation, and then there's the real life initiation. And so, unfortunately, William is young, but he still has to jump into that initiation. He doesn't have a choice.
Right.
And honestly, if you're old enough to drive right now, you don't either. You really don't have a choice. You can enter in and ask God for his help through that initiation process. And then when maybe some guy does play a stupid trick on you or is mean to you or whatever, then you can take it back to God and say, okay, God, are you using that as part of my initiation? And what do I need to get from that? Rather than just being mad about it.
Right.
And, wanting to take a sword to somebody, as in the scene.
On the other side of that, for me, as I just hear that music, that's all I have to hear. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would bring me back to a lot of my initiation into biblical masculinity, into finding out what God has in mind to become a man, because at boot camp we use that, and it brings back so many different times in my own life that I was struggling, and something through boot camp lit up to show me the way back to God, the way back to, wow, this is something that has speaking directly to my story, to my individual life that is going to work, and certainly into, from our standpoint, the fellowship of men, the band of brothers that we have. We have been through those clips so many times. We've heard that music so many times that it can't help but make you feel like, here we are. Like this is where we need to be, and this is the battle that we need to fight, and it's fighting for the new guys that show up.
Yeah, you bringing that up, Robbie. What happens at boot camp, at the spiritual boot camps that we're talking about, is it is a little bit of a process of initiation, but what happens at a boot camp is what should be happening in all stages of your life as you enter into that new stage. And that is that I learn to enter in, fail, usually, get back up, enter in again, maybe fail yet again, get back up, enter in again. And that's I think the most powerful part of the boot camp for me. The first time I ever went to one was I heard guys like John Eldridge or Craig McConnell or Bart Hansen, who I probably identified more with than any other of the guys. I heard them talk about their failures. I heard them, and I hate to say it, but most of my life growing up in church was not a spiritual leader standing up and saying, hey, look, I blew it once too. This is how that happened. And this is how God redeemed that and is now using it for me to be a blessing to you. And that was the difference in a boot camp experience. So every time I hear those clips like you, my mind immediately goes back to, sometimes it goes back to the actual boot camp that, may have impacted me the most that we did together, or maybe one that I went to with somebody else that impacted me a lot. But it also takes me back to those hard things that you talked about, Sam, that, I'm glad I made it through. I don't want to do it again. I'm glad for what it accomplished in my life. Do not want to do it again, type of thing.
Yeah, it definitely does. I was thinking about a little bit ago when you're talking about how the initiation helps you realize you're part of the group. My boys were able to come up in a lot of the masculine journey message, the wild heart message. It's been around their whole life for the most part as they've gotten older. But I think some of the stuff that's made them feel like a part of the team is that you guys have welcomed them with open arms. When they've come in and, Eli ran with Harold, he ran the computer a lot of times when he was young. Caleb has done stuff, but also, Robbie, I was thinking about when you and Andy took the boys out to drive the Jeep and teach them how to drive a stick shift, right? I think that was a big difference maker for them, because you had somebody that wasn't their dad pouring into them, that cared about them, right? And I think it forever linked them to the masculine journey and the team, even in a deeper place, because we were living out what we talked about.
Yeah.
And they could see that.
If you're a dad and you have boys, if you're a mom, a single mom especially, and you have boys, you need some really good godly men in your life that you can trust your sons with, or really good godly women that you can trust your daughters with. It applies to both. The best thing I did as a father was not all the lectures. It wasn't even all the prayers, over my kids or anything else. Not that those were bad, but the best thing that I see the most fruit from today is being fairly consistent, but making sure that my kids had good people who weren't me and weren't their mom in their lives, where they could go hang out with my friends for a day, a week, whatever, and do things, go to work for somebody, go to work for a Sam on a job site and, learn how to be an apprentice, things like that. That's what I did the best with my son, especially, was I had 5 or 6 guys that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, they probably wouldn't tell my son the same thing I would tell him in the same situation, but I knew God and they walked together and I knew I could trust them. Even if I didn't necessarily agree with them on every point, I knew I could trust them with my son's heart. And that was one of the biggest things that I did. And that's multiple processes of initiation is all that is.
Yeah, I was thinking back about the time when I'm not a car guy. I'm really not a car guy. I can work on houses. That doesn't bother me. Cars just infuriate me. I can't stand to do it. I don't like it. My hands are too fat for the small parts. That's a big part of it. But I did learn how to do disc brakes. And mainly out of necessity I had to, because I didn't have the money to pay somebody. And so someone had taught me how to do them. And as Caleb was getting older, I took him out and I had him help me do the brakes on his mom's car and my car a couple times. And then when Eli came along, it was kind of cool. Caleb invited him out, said, hey, come out here and help me change my brakes. And once in a while they say, Dad, can you look at this? But over time, it was really fun just to see how they grew together, got closer, as Caleb invited him into a process he'd been invited into. Right? And that's what we're talking about as part of this initiation.
As you guys are talking, actually, I'm sitting there thinking, gee, my parents didn't really have friends. I mean, we moved because my father's career. We moved every 2 or 3 years. And I was never around my father's friends because honestly, he didn't have many. In fact, I couldn't tell you who they were. My mother, was kind of a lone wolf too. And so we moved all the time. So I always felt like an outsider. And now I'm beginning to go, gee, I don't feel like I'm part of this, or things that happened where I really made me feel part of something, make me feel included, really felt like home and really like, oh my goodness. And so, just, as you guys are talking, just think about it. Are your kids involved in your friends, or are you like me? Like you suffer from that, and because of that, you stay outside of, because you don't feel like you're part of it. And that requires some courage.
It does, to say, yes, that's my reality. How do I fix it? Well, the beauty of the whole masculine journey and feminine journey, quite frankly, is God will take you back through the beloved son stage, the beloved daughter stage, the cowboy ranger, the warrior, the lover. He'll take you back through those stages in a kind, loving, productive way. It won't be like learning algebra in school. Why am I doing this? Well, because you're supposed to. No, it'll be, no, there's meat here on the bone for you to gnaw on.
We can't forget that the enemy's in the mix of trying to remind you of stuff. Robbie, I hope you don't mind if I share a story about
please.
you. Okay. Robbie, we've been walking together for a long time. 2009, right? Since we've all been together. And along the way, one of the boot camps, we went to surprise Robbie when he's up and speaking. And so he used to use the word shenanigans a lot. And so we got these shirts that said something about I'm here for the shenanigans or something like that. And so when he started to speak, we all stood up and, showed him our shirt. He hadn't seen it before. And I remember you sharing after the fact that your first thought was, well, why wasn't I included? Right? Because God was still after some of those things. Now, look, you realize pretty quickly, okay, they're doing this for me, right? But it was that, again, the enemy is just like trying to get you to go back to that place.
Immediately.
Right. And so it's a pull to say, okay, hey, can I get you back in this bondage that you've been getting broken free from? Right. And you didn't stay there but just a second. You shared with us after the fact how he had attacked you in that.
Yeah. And it clearly is. It's a struggle that, you guys have really helped me realize. And, I can't believe how blessed I feel to have the groups of friends, and the fact, and Harold's here and he walks with Gaither, another one of my good friends, and to have the fellowship of men that God has given us is beyond precious. And I've always said it feels like heaven to me because I feel like I belong. It feels like you're truly loved for who you are, and you have a chance to do that. And there's no feeling like that to me, like boot camp, of being in that position where we're really battling it out together.
And that's been the biggest battleground that we have too. I mean, it really is, because that's what Satan hates the most. He hates unity, because how will people know that you're my disciples, that you love one another, that you are truly one part with another? And so he can't have that. And I remember at a particular boot camp where you and I were very upset with each other.
Just one?
Oh, no, there's a
I
couple I can think of.
I said a particular
okay.
a particular one, Rob.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah. I remember probably the most hurtful thing I've ever said to you was, I said something to the effect of, Robbie, you forget we invited you into this ministry. We invited you into this journey. And I was, in a mean way, trying to put you in your place, right? I mean, that was the fleshly side of it. But that was probably the single most painful thing I've maybe ever said to you. And of course, we've worked that out now. And both kind of figured out how stupid we were, but, or at least me.
I was, I was sitting there thinking the very same thing.
How stupid Darren was.
Yes. That's a recurring thought. I mean, it's kind
Actually,
of like tape to his forehead.
as good as that is, it wasn't what I was thinking. What I was thinking is, you said for leaders to stand up and say, wow, we failed.
Mhm.
And if there's a place we failed, and horribly,
Yeah.
it is in that very area
Mhm.
of unity. And God has walked with us through this. And it's certainly some of the most painful stuff I've ever been through in my life. But again, it was part of the initiation process. And if you didn't risk it, if you didn't risk that kind of love, if you didn't risk that kind of fellowship, if you didn't risk being all in and wholehearted, then you couldn't experience the pain that we experienced when it blew up. And passionate, wholehearted people blow up because they really care. In my opinion, passionate, wholehearted people I've been around, they're all in and they're passionate. But as that happened, did we find ourselves right where God wanted us?
Right.
I can remember hours and hours and hours of prayer and in fellowship with either one of the, over the whole situation. It was difficult.
Well, and it also gives you perspective, right? When God can take you through to the other side of that. I went through. Sorry, I'm shifting to me a little bit.
That's okay.
Where God's been initiating me, and it's been a long journey for my wife on it. But I've been married twice before, and to be honest, there are times I wasn't a great husband. I was lacking initiation, and after I got divorced the second time, I was single for 10 years. And about 9 of those years, I've been dating the same person. But God was initiating me all along the way because I was so broken on the things that I knew I'd messed up and the ways I'd been hurt, that He had a lot of stuff to heal and to work on. And what I found, and I've only been married a little over a month now, so I'm not taking it too far, but we've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
But I really find myself in a much different place than I've ever been because of the initiation process.
Mhm.
When something comes up that would have just made me so frustrated in the past, I have the perspective that's really not a big deal. When everything's a big deal. If you've been a parent and your first kid acts up in a restaurant, you think it's the worst thing that ever happens. By the time you get to your fourth kid, you're like, whatever. It's perspective, right?
Yes, they dropped a pacifier.
Yeah. You just wipe it off on your shirt and give it back to them. Yeah. Yeah. That kind of thing. But I think that initiation thing, those failures is what we need to be humbled
Mhm.
to where we can get initiated till we get it on the other side and be healthier for it.
Mhm.
As a group, we're healthier.
Well, we've talked about this a lot together, and God has done a lot of initiating with us in this regard, and that is that real intimacy, real unity, real oneness only comes on the other side of conflict.
Mhm.
Look, if you fell madly in love with somebody and have never had a frustrating moment with them, you do not know yet what love really is. I know that sounds arrogant, but you don't.
Mhm.
Until you've fought hard and got to the other side, not win, okay, not win the argument, gotten to the other side and figure out, hey, that person's heart is the most important thing in the world to me. And I know that my heart is the most important thing in the world to them. And so let's stop avoiding that. If all you ever do is get to the point where you feel the conflict and you back away from it and never go ahead and push through, you will never get to the intimacy and the community and the unity that you want. I mean, there's scripture's full of it, but there's all kinds of secular books that, on that. There's a book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh, yeah.
That the whole premise of that book is, unless you're willing to fight with each other in the boardroom, you're not ever going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And you got to do it with respect. You got to do it with kindness. And sometimes you're going to need to say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that, or man, I really thought you were wrong there, but you were right. And, those things have to happen. And so there has to be humility in it and redemption. I mean, let's just call it what it is. It's redemption. It's God redeeming the stupidity or the pain or the hurt or the risk. I mean, all of those things in order to bring us to a deeper point of unity, intimacy, one mind. I mean, all of the things, if you look at all the one another passages in scripture, there's a reason why Paul and Jesus and Peter and others talk about the same things over and over and over and over again with regard to how to live with one another. It's because it's hard.
Right.
And you're going to hurt each other. And it's not just in a marriage, it's in a church. I mean,
It's in a friendship.
how many people have quit church
Oh, yeah.
because somebody got mad at them and you know,
Well, yeah, the old saying, there's no hurt like church hurt,
yeah,
right? And, you know, when you're talking about that, I remember, you know, I think it may have been in that same book, but they talk about the successful teams forming, storming, norming.
Yeah.
Right? You have to go through the storm. And I think about the great quote from Sean Connery in The First Night, right? Where he says, there's a peace that only comes on the other side of war,
Mhm.
right? You won't really know the depth of the peace unless you went through the war,
Mhm.
right? And there's a lot of wisdom in that. And when you can look at it from that perspective, it doesn't make you excited to go through it, but you know there's hope for the other side of it.
And even in the things we keep really hidden, you know, one of the worst things, you know, and that to Darren's point and Sam's point, that, you know, when I was addicted to pornography, what I was doing to my wife that whole time that she had no idea of, to bring that to the forefront was a war. Believe me.
Oh yeah.
And I had it coming. But Tammy was loving somebody that she didn't know. You know, I wasn't getting the love because she thought I was somebody I wasn't.
Mhm.
But when we went through that time and she was able to forgive me and I could actually look in her eyes and see that she still loved me, even though she actually knew what a disgusting human being I am. Right? I mean, that she loved me, not the picture that I thought that I was. And therein lies the same thing we have. In other words, you guys have seen me the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Mhm.
and you still love me. Like, what?
Does it always have to get back to Clint Eastwood?
It should.
Yeah.
Every show should end with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, it's got to get there somewhere. Well, thank you for listening. Go to masculinejourney.org to register for the upcoming boot camp. It is an advanced camp. So if you've been to a boot camp anywhere with any other group, you know, attached to Wild Heart, you can come to this. Or if you've been to one of our entrenchments. And speaking of entrenchments, if your church would like to have us come for a 2-day time to talk on these topics, get a hold of us at masculinejourney.org. Let God lead you this week and let him initiate you. We will talk with you next week.
All right, you got to go to the cats.
Here in a minute. Yeah.